Carrie Lightley is one of the UK's leading accessible travel bloggers, a freelance travel writer, and she also heads up the marketing team for national disability organisation Access-Able. So through her blog, which is carrieannlightley.com. I'm sure she'll post a link up at some point to that. She aims to encourage and inspire disabled people to travel to, explore and discover new places. Carrie-Ann's blog has become a firm favourite with her followers and led her to write for The Guardian, The Sun, HuffPost and TripAdvisor, as well as many other websites, magazines and industry publications. And in 2019, 20 and 21, Carrie-Ann was named as one of the top 100 most influential disabled people in the UK on the Shaw Trust Disability Power 100 list. So Carrie-Ann, over to you.
Thank you, Nat, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for having me this evening. Really strange to hear that read out loud because I'm so used to seeing that text in print. It's really strange to hear somebody else reading those words. I've got some slides I'm going to attempt to share with you today. Bear with me for a minute or two whilst I try and get the technology to work. Can everybody see the slide?
We can see your presenter view.
Oh, sorry about that. Bear with me. Let's stop doing that. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm hoping that's now sharing as a slideshow. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Nat. Thank you for your help. So, welcome everybody. Again, really thanks for joining me. I'm really delighted to be joining a session with Adult CP Hub because I think for the last kind of year or so that I've been involved with the charity, I've been able to receive a lot of support, a lot of knowledge, and I just think it's an excellent initiative because as we all know, there just isn't enough out there to support adults with cerebral palsy. So it feels really lovely on a personal level for me to know that I can try and be a part of that initiative and try and help you guys out with some of my knowledge. So my name's Carrie Lightley. As Nat said, I'm a disabled person who has a passion for travel. I've worked in the accessible travel industry for about 16 years now. And I'm also head of marketing at national disability organisation Access-Able. Access-Able create detailed access guides to tens of thousands of different places across the UK, which I'll be telling you about later on. I think, you know, travel as a disabled person, as a wheelchair user, which I am, it can be stressful. It can be daunting. It can sometimes be pretty disastrous. But it can also be really freeing and empowering and just absolutely wonderful. And what I try to do is tell people about my personal experiences of travel to hopefully give a little bit of inspiration to encourage people to travel themselves. You know, and my tips are really based on my own experiences. I think it's important to say that, you know, we all know that disability, indeed cerebral palsy, is a huge spectrum. And so what works for me might not be the same as what works for other people. But I hope that some of these sort of basic tips will have kind of a universal appeal or will help you to think about how you might be able to apply them to your own situation. But it's important to say I'm a manual wheelchair user. I travel with a manual chair, sometimes with a power pack, sometimes without. Sometimes I travel on my own, sometimes I travel with other people. I don't have care needs. I don't use things like a ceiling track hoist. So that's naturally reflected in my experiences and my tips based on that. But I hope that they will be transferable to most of us. So my top tips broadly are around researching and planning, using technology, having documentation to back up arrangements, thinking about those essentials that you need to pack. Flexibility is a really, really key one here. I'm very guilty of trying to pack so much into my travel plans that I exhaust myself and don't actually get the benefit of a trip. And that takes me to the last tip, which is have fun and enjoy it. I think it's so easy for us to get bogged down in the research, in the worry that things may not be accessible, etc., that we forget that travel is to be enjoyed. So each one of my tips kind of broadly is there. I'm going to go into each one of those in more detail, and I've got some little bits of video, etc., to show throughout the presentation. So research and planning. My kind of process here is what I usually go through when I'm booking a trip. So people say to me, how do you do it? How do you find accessible places? And my answer to that is, well, there's no quick fix. There's no kind of hard and fast rule for this is the place that I go to. It's often as anybody else would organize their travel, but just thinking in a little bit more detail about the things that you need. So I always start with, okay, where do I want to go? Where do I want to go? Just taking a step back, not necessarily worrying about accessibility. At this point, where is my ideal destination for this trip? And then I'll ask individuals for recommendations. I'll ask people in things like Facebook groups. I know we've got a really engaged Facebook group for adult CP support. There is an excellent Facebook group called the Accessible Travel Club, which is a kind of, it's got a worldwide focus. And the idea is that there are lots of people on that group who obviously want to find information about travel, but they are also experts themselves in where they live. So I'm based in the Lake District, not a very accessible place actually, but I could tell you pretty easily off the top of my head my top 5 accessible places to go here. And that's the idea of this Facebook group. People can post in there asking for recommendations, asking for tips from people who've traveled to similar destinations before. And also people can kind of chip in with, oh, I've been here or I live here, etc. And it is all people who have some form of disability or impairment. So I find that a really useful place to go. And then, check for access information online, whether that is using specialist providers like Accessable, which I'll show you a little bit more about later on, or whether it's having a look on the hotel's website to see if they've got any accessibility information on there. I find just really simply Googling disabled access and the name of the hotel, the name of the destination, or the name of the attraction, etc., will usually bring some kind of detail up. Particularly if I'm traveling overseas, I like to get confirmation in writing and photographs of the venue that I'm going to, of the accommodations that I've asked for. And this is, there's a personal story here. So I had a holiday to Turkey quite a long time ago now. I had a lot of email conversation back and forth with the owner of the hotel, and they said, yeah, we've got ramps throughout, we've got the shower access that you need, everything will be fine. I didn't ask for any photographs. And when I arrived, there was indeed ramps throughout, but they were so steep that I couldn't use them independently. So they may as well have been steps, actually. If I'd had a photograph of that in advance, I would have been able to understand that might not have been the best destination for me to go to. And then so you know, confirming in writing, right, thank you, Carrie Ann, we've booked an accessible room for you. Then at least you've got that kind of backup. You've got that, okay, I've done everything I can to confirm what my needs are. And then, you know, I would repeat this process for each part of the trip. So I'd probably start with accommodation, and then I'd look at, okay, are there restaurants nearby that I can research into for accessibility, asking for recommendations, checking online? Are there places to visit, tourist attractions, etc., that I can check information online for, and just build a bit of an itinerary. Now that obviously sounds a little bit daunting. And so one of the things that I have created to try and make that process easier is a wheelchair accessible travel planner. So it does focus on wheelchair access because that's my needs and requirements. That's my area of expertise. But essentially, you can go onto my blog, for which I'll share the details in a little bit. If you sign up to subscribe, then you'll be emailed a free copy of what I call my 30-day wheelchair accessible travel planner. And it breaks down my process of planning a trip into one action per day for 30 days. And the idea is that by the end of that, you have an entire trip researched and planned. And just by following each one of the prompts, you don't have to do it all at once. It helps with pacing, it helps with not getting too overwhelmed, etc. And then, yeah, my last point on here is, again, really important. We do get bogged down in the detail. We do get bogged down in the, oh goodness me, is it going to be accessible to me? Have I got the room that I need? Can I get to the restaurant? Can I use the bus? And I think it's easy to forget about the things that you actually want to get out of the trip. So yes, I need an accessible room. Yes, I need transport from the airport that's going to be suitable for me. I also, you know, big feature of a holiday for me is a nice cocktail and a nice beach view. And it's thinking about that, you know, is there a half decent cocktail bar near this hotel? Is it not only accessible? Is there a spa that I can get into for a nice treatment? So I think, you know, it's it's thinking about the things that make a holiday, as well as the important accessibility parts. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about using technology. So, you know, the thought of spending hours researching online often fills people with dread. And I think, you know, it's important to say that there are websites and apps out there that can help. Often people will have done this kind of checking process for you. So they'll have visited somewhere, or they'll have given a review, or they'll have done some kind of rating process to show how accessible they are. And it does, you know, it can reduce the time that you need to spend, and it can reduce stress, importantly. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about Accessable and the information that they produce and how that can help in holiday and travel planning. So Accessable create detailed access guides. We have detailed access guides to around 70,000 places across the UK. It is just UK based at the moment, though we have big aspirations to take it further. So watch this space. Crucially, Accessable don't rate accessibility of places, because we recognise that what is accessible to one person is very different to what is accessible to the next person, even if they have similar needs, never mind if they have different impairments. So it's facts, figures and photographs. It's about stating what is there in that building, how wide the doorway is, what the lighting levels are like, what the ramp gradient is like, if there's level access, if there's an accessible toilet, etc. There are detailed photographs of each facility throughout the access guides, and every single place that you see on the Accessable website or app has been visited in person by a trained surveyor who works for Accessable, who's collected that information, so that we can guarantee that that doorway measurement is 100% correct, that that photograph of the accessible toilet has been taken by a member of our team, and we can verify that that is indeed the accessible toilet at that venue. And amazingly, I think this is a real game changer. As well as a website, we have all the details available on the app, on the Accessable app, which is free for everybody to download. And I think it sort of flips on its head this idea of having to research and having to plan a lot in advance, because actually an app like this gives you really detailed access information in your pocket. If I were a more spontaneous person, which I am definitely not, then, you know, I might be able to arrive in a new city in the UK, pull the app out of my pocket and go, right, I'm going to pick somewhere to go for a drink that's accessible to me. So I think, yeah, so this next slide just talks to you a little bit about the Accessable app and the features that it has available. I'm hoping that if I play it, the sound will come through, but Nat, do let me know if there's anything I need to be doing for that.
There isn't any sound.
There isn't any sound. Well,
no.
It's actually just background music. So if people are able to read off the screen, that's great. So brief video on some of the features of the Accessable app. Sorry that you couldn't get the sound there, but actually it was just background music, so you didn't really miss anything. It is free and available for anybody to download on the App Store and on Google Play. So I'd encourage everybody who can to do that. And if you do enjoy the experience of using the app, we really love it if you could leave us a review on your App Store, because it means that we can then reach more people with more information. So on to my next tip, which is about documentation. And this is something that I've learned from experience, really. As with that story I told a little while ago about the trip to Turkey, because I hadn't asked for photographs to aid in my planning, I found that actually I got to a resort that wasn't really very accessible to me, and I couldn't independently travel around it for a full week. So look, these are just some of the things that I do when I'm planning a trip. You know, I make sure that I've got everything saved, all of my confirmations, all of my documentation. These days I tend to just save it in a folder on my phone, in a folder on my emails or something like that, so that I'm not carrying around reams and reams of paperwork, but that I have got enough evidence that if something does crop up, that I can say, look, here's my evidence that I booked this correctly, here's my evidence that I notified you of my needs in advance, etc. It also gives me peace of mind, because I can say, do you know what, I've done everything I can. This is as much as I can do. And obviously, you know, having things like manuals for any equipment that you might be traveling with makes good sense, because often if things do break, it's when we're out and about, it's when we're away from home, it's when we're not expecting it. And so, you know, if you need to get some assistance to do a quick repair of a frame or a chair or something like that, it's really helpful if you can have that kind of thing handy. And obviously, you know, any prescriptions, there are various different rules for traveling with medication depending on which country you're traveling to. They can be found pretty easily online, or, you know, speaking to a GP, a medical professional, can let you know what you need to do in terms of traveling with certain medication, especially if you're traveling with controlled medications, etc. And sometimes you might have to produce a letter. So there's things like sort of fit to fly letters if you have a health condition which might impact your ability to fly on a plane, then the airline might ask for you to provide a fit to fly letter, which is something that again can be accessed from a GP surgery. Sometimes there is a fee to get that kind of thing produced. I've actually managed to get something where it'll cover me for a number of years. So it's sort of, you know, I had to pay my GP an admin fee to get this letter, but actually I should be covered off for quite a while without having to request or pay for that again. And then on to my packing essentials. So I'm just going to talk you through each one of these from my point of view. Obviously, medication is incredibly important. I take medication on a daily basis, multiple times, and it's very important to make sure I've got that organised for travelling. I use things like dosset boxes so that I can easily see which medication I need to take every day. Again, there are various rules and regulations depending on where you're traveling to. They may say that you have to keep medication in original packaging and with prescriptions, etc. You can decant when you get to the other side, I suppose. And the other thing is to make sure that I always try to have more than enough medication to cover me, to thinking about, you know, potential delays, and also, you know, if you're traveling, there is the potential you're using a bit more energy. There's the potential to have flare-ups of various conditions and things. So sort of make sure that you've got enough of that to keep things under control. Mobility equipment. I wouldn't be able to travel without my wheelchair. That would be pretty pointless. I wouldn't be able to get very far at all. So obviously, I have to take my mobility equipment everywhere I go, but I also have to make sure that it's in good shape for that, because, you know, traveling even on a bus or a train, things like making sure that my brakes are tight enough so that I'm not sliding up and down the aisles, as has happened before. So, you know, if I've got a trip planned, particularly if it is an overseas trip, I usually spend a couple of days before with my husband, just, you know, giving the wheelchair a good service, making sure everything's up to scratch, tires are pumped up, brakes are working properly, all that kind of thing. And I guess it's also worth thinking about, you know, maybe you don't use equipment at home day to day, but actually if you're going to be traveling and you're going to be covering longer distances, do you need to think about taking something like a frame or sticks that you wouldn't use normally, because actually you might be a bit more tired traveling through an airport, traveling longer distances. I do not go anywhere without my phone. I don't know about anybody else. I would love to. I would absolutely love to. But it has become a travel companion. It's how I take photographs for the blog. It's how I make notes for the blog when I'm traveling. I look at places to go. I'll store things like kind of ebooks, so like travel guides and things on my phone. And obviously all of that evidence, all of that documentation that I was talking about previously, you know, that's all in there. I mean, I don't know how anybody else feels about this, but, you know, I don't even do a mile-long dog walk without my phone with me, because I'm always very conscious that I may need some help from somebody. So, you know, something could happen to my wheelchair. I could have a fall. I don't know. It feels like a good kind of safety mechanism to have that around. And then thinking about luggage. So I travel with all different kinds of luggage depending on where I'm traveling, how I'm traveling, and more importantly, who I'm traveling with. So if I'm traveling with my husband, and he's driving, I don't drive, I travel by train independently, then I know that I can load up the car with suitcases, that I don't have to worry about traveling light. I can fill the boot, and I've got somebody who is able to carry the suitcases to help me. More often these days, I travel on my own for work throughout the UK, usually by train. And it's taken a number of years for me to find the best kind of luggage solution for the back of my wheelchair. So what I actually have is like a laptop bag, which has a separate compartment for clothes and things. That's worked really well for me. But it's not a specialist disability piece of luggage. It's not. It was just something off Amazon that a friend recommended, and I think it is worth thinking outside the box for those kinds of things. We know that you can pay a premium for disability specific products, and I don't always think that that's necessary. I think it's about you working out what works best for you personally and your needs. So luggage is always going to be, there's always going to be a trade-off for me personally. If I'm traveling alone, I can't take all the stuff I want, but I can be independent and it can be accessible. If I'm traveling with somebody else, I can take all the stuff I want, but they're going to have to support me with that. Wheelchair accessories, I've noted this one here because one of my absolute game changers for traveling has been a really simple piece of plastic on the side of my wheelchair. It's a cup holder. And you can imagine going through a train station in the morning, getting ready to go on a work trip, go to a long meeting. I just want to be able to have a coffee at the station, just like I can see everybody else doing. But I have two hands, I have two wheels, and after spending many, many years clamping beverages between my knees while sitting in my wheelchair, and ending up with tea burns and all kinds of things, I discovered wheelchair cup holders. Yeah, I mean, again, you can also go on Amazon and buy them that are designed for prams and buggies, so you don't necessarily have to pay a premium, but it is worth trying a few different ones out so that you can get the right one for you. Total game changer for me. And comfortable clothes. I hate traveling in anything that feels restricting or causes me pain, or that just doesn't feel comfy. I always feel like the act of traveling, the act of actually getting to somewhere is exhausting. Is there's so much that we need to think about, and it can be tiring just sitting on a plane for hours or sitting on a train for hours. And yeah, I don't want to have to deal with wearing clothing that's going to be restrictive or make me feel uncomfortable. So I always plan my traveling outfits well, and plan to wear something that I know is suitable for whatever occasion I'm going to, but that ultimately makes me feel comfortable. And yeah, I guess I've already covered this last point really, but there are all kinds of everyday items out there that can make traveling easier, that again don't necessarily have to have that disability price tag. So I remember somebody telling me that they always take a pack of cable ties with them when traveling, because we have so many chargers, etc. Not just your phone charger, but potentially your wheelchair charger, other pieces of equipment, etc. Pull it all together. Have like a bag of, like a roll of sort of disposable bags, something like that you can really easily just shove into a pocket. But if you find yourselves with lots and lots of different things to carry, different things to wrap up, etc., again, it can make that easier. And things like my laptop bag, that's totally changed the game for me. It means that I can travel with all of my work equipment and with some clothing and with the toiletries that I need, and it sits really easily on the back of my chair. So yeah, just worth a little bit of thinking outside the box there. Be flexible. So I talked about this and the importance of this right at the beginning. And again, this goes back to a personal story for me. So my husband and I, we have a bit of a travel pact. So every year on our wedding anniversary, we go and travel somewhere new. We go and stay somewhere new where we haven't been before. Instead of presents or cards or anything, we find that experiencing a new place together is just a really lovely way to mark the occasion. And this year we're going to Amsterdam in a few weeks. So I'm very excited about that. I'm going on the Eurostar for the first time ever, and to Amsterdam for the first time ever. So keep your eye out for some content on that. But the story that this kind of flexibility need reminds me of is that one of our wedding anniversary trips was to Pisa. And I had done all of the research, all of the planning, all of the booking. You can imagine in my house, nobody else makes the travel plans. It always has to come down to me. And I arranged a really packed itinerary. We were going to travel by train and go somewhere else one day, and we were going to visit all these different tourist attractions. And the flight was delayed, and we were only going for 3 nights. So the flight was delayed by probably half a day. It had a really significant impact on the trip. And it meant that we couldn't do a lot of the itinerary that I had planned. And I think because I've been so rigid about my itinerary, I found that really difficult to deal with. I found it really emotional. Like, oh, I've been so looking forward to this trip and I can't do these things now. And so ever since then, I have just really tried to be more flexible, to, if I can, stay for a little bit longer than I probably need to, make it a bit of a longer trip. So, you know, we're going to Amsterdam in a few weeks and we've actually booked 4 nights, 5 days, which is, everybody tells me, oh, you can do Amsterdam in 3 days, you don't need that long. Well, actually, it allows time for disruptions, but it also gives me some downtime. It also gives me some time to listen to my body, to, you know, if I'm in pain or if I'm fatigued because I've just done too much, we've been too far that day or whatever, then it allows me to have a day or half a day of just resting, just, you know, enjoying the hotel or whatever. And yeah, that comes down to, you know, don't exhaust yourself. I always find that when I am on a trip, I feel like I must experience all of it and I must like soak it all up and take it all in because I just never get the chance to do this. But nobody wants to come home from holiday more exhausted than before they went. Everybody wants to feel the benefit of a break. And I think I'm starting to learn that actually a slower version of travel, a version of travel that is probably more to be appreciated, suits me and my body better. And then enjoy it. And I do think this is the most important tip, sorry, because we do get bogged down. We do get worried about what might possibly go wrong. We do struggle with things like pain because travel takes a lot out of us. We might struggle with things like mobility equipment being damaged when we've flown, etc. There is still so many elements of a trip to be enjoyed, and that's what it's for. That's why we put all the work into researching and planning so that we can have a nice time. You know, all of my focus on that perfect trip to Pisa, it did really mean that when things did go wrong, I struggled so much emotionally, and that then had an impact on how I was feeling physically, and that then had an impact on how much I enjoyed the trip. But we still had a wonderful time. We still made brilliant memories. I still look back at the photos from that trip and laugh and smile. And so, you know, things can and things may go wrong, but maybe that's part of the adventure. Maybe that's part of enjoying travel and embracing it. Now I'm going to skip this slide because I was going to show a video here, but if the sound isn't working, then it's not going to translate well at all. So that takes me straight to questions. I'm sorry, I don't know how we're doing for time, so hopefully that's timed all right. I think we're doing okay for time, aren't we? So over to you guys. Any thoughts on what I've shared? Anything I might have missed? Your top tips to travel, because we all know different things, we all have different experiences, and anything that you've always wanted to know about accessible travel but you've never been able to ask before.
Thank you. Nat has had to just pop off, so I'm going to step into her shoes. Sarah, would you like to go first and open the floor?
Oh yes, I've been waiting for this section forever. First of all, what to do with carers? Can you take? Is there any carers that the carers? Because I need carers to go with me, and I need carers. Would it be cheap if I could hire carers from abroad? Do they have any care packages abroad? Also, I took 2 carers from where I was, and although I thought we have a great time working relationship here, but when I took them, it was an absolute disaster. First of all, one of the carers didn't have any money at all. When we got to the booking, clocking in, she forgot she brought an old passport instead of a new one, and she had no money to pay for the new one to be updated, so I had to pay it for her. And then we had to ring up back at home and say, could you get the new passport? We had to get a taxi and bring it all the way up to the Manchester airport, and then everybody was delayed, and I didn't get to Cyprus till God knows what time. Luckily, the airplane waited for me, but when I actually got in there, we got so many dirty looks and tutting and everything, and it was just an absolute nightmare. The care was brilliant. Just you get to know people when you're outside the working environment, and you get to know people how they are. So, and also I've got a BiPAP A40 machine, which is a dehumidifier as well. So I will need information on that. I will need information on carers externally.
So can I summarize, Sarah? I think that there is obviously different levels of support that people may need when they're traveling, and your question, I suppose, is what does Carrie Ann know regarding the world of taking carers with us, or finding a carer in the location that you're going to, and the pros and cons of that possibly, and whose responsibility is it, which may be something that you need to arrange beforehand, but I know very little about it, so I'll hand over to Carrie Ann.
Yeah, so it's not a situation that I have personal experience of, but it is a situation that I know a little bit about from my work over the years and from friends who are in a similar situation. I think that there are few, but some agencies who can organise a package that would include care. So one that springs to the top of my mind is a company called Limitless Travel. Who can arrange packages with transport, with care, etc. The pro of that is that you have it all included as a package. The con of that is that it will significantly cost, because somebody's arranged all of that for you, essentially. I think in terms of taking carers with you, what I have understood from my friends who've done similar things is that, ultimately it's up to you as the employer of the carer to decide what is and isn't appropriate in terms of, who pays for the holiday, who pays for meals, etc. Obviously the cost of their time spent caring should be covered. But what has been helpful, I've found, what friends have told me have been helpful in that situation is essentially to have a bit of a contract that says, for this holiday, for this trip, this is what you'll commit to as a carer, and this is what I'll commit to as your employer. And that might be covering things like paying for meals, covering things like making sure they have the correct passport, etc. So that you've got something stated, you've got something that you've both signed, so that everybody knows what's expected of them. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and also I've got a BPAP. My disability is a lot worse since that, and I have a respiratory failure, so I have a BPAP machine. What would I get? Would my travel insurance premiums would go up, wouldn't they? And what would I do about that? Because I went to Cyprus and I went on a disability. It was a hotel and package. It's called Disabled Holiday, and they had a hoist in the pool. They had electric beds, and they had a lot of amenities, which was great for me. And plus, the company that I went through had you told them what you need, like a bed and hoists and shower chairs and that. So what would you suggest about that?
In terms of insurance?
Yeah, about stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, so and I think actually insurance was one of the things that I was talking to Miriam about when we were planning this session, so it's probably worth just covering that off as a question here. Insurance premiums when you have a pre-existing condition, any kind of pre-existing condition, are generally higher than people who haven't got them. There are specialist companies out there who will do specific insurance products for people with pre-existing conditions, and the idea of that is that it tries to keep the cost down. What I actually use, my personal tool for travel insurance is if you go onto Money Supermarket, the search engine for insurance. If you Google Money Supermarket travel insurance medical condition, there's a specific portal that you can go through. You type in, or you only do medical screening once, and then they will give you a comparison of all of the different providers that can cover the conditions that you've got and what the premiums will be.
That's a really good piece of advice.
That's it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for starting the questions off, Sarah. Can we go to Laura Cook now?
Can't hear you.
Laura, I can't quite hear you. Oh no. Your mute's not on. Yeah, that's a good idea. Type it in the chat. While you're typing, should we? Oh, okay. You get your earphones.
Headphones, yeah.
Mim, can I ask my question?
Of course, please go for it, Emma.
So one really is a question, one's a tip. Just that my life changed when I decided that I was going to use a wheelchair in an airport, even though that I'm not a regular wheelchair user. And the idea of conserving energy for the trip kind of made it okay for me to say, well, I'm going to use a wheelchair. And actually, it really changed my life in terms of travel and not being too exhausted. And it is really easy to arrange that. So I just wanted to share that. But my question really was around having a young family and wanting to have a a room with disabled access or disabled amenities in a family room, I tend to find that the room with the disabled access has the single beds, and with the expectation that the other room isn't for the disabled person, and therefore often the children get the room with the double beds that they don't want to sleep in together. And I know that when Miriam and I have travelled together, they also find it really difficult to think that somebody who has a disability might also have a family or a companion with them. Is there any tips in terms of how you ensure that that doesn't happen? Because once you get to the resort, it's really difficult to change things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting one. Accessible family rooms are so difficult to come by. I saw I think my first ever one like 10 years ago, and it has stuck in my mind ever since because it was such a good example. So if anybody wants that as a tip, the Big Blue Hotel in Blackpool have really excellent wheelchair accessible family rooms, where you have the accessible room, and then they have almost like an annex that goes off around the corner that has some bunk beds. So that works really well. I think it's in terms of, how do you avoid that sort of going wrong before you get there. I think it is, just trying to communicate with your travel agent, with the person that you're booking with, whoever that might be. Actually, this is what's happened to me before, and this is what I'd really like to avoid happening again. So can we get some photographs? Can we get something that shows what facilities are available? I mean, the issue with twin beds versus double beds in accessible room is a whole other, I'm pretty sure we could do a whole other session on that. But I think really it is communication, but it's also important to know what your rights are when you're asking for something like that. And, particularly if you're traveling in the UK, you have rights based on the Equality Act, which say that disabled people are entitled to an equal service as non-disabled people. And so that is a way to challenge this. Essentially, if you're being asked to pay for 2 rooms because of your accessibility needs, and if an alternative family room would be available for somebody who was not disabled and they would only have to pay for 1 room, then you do have grounds to sort of challenge that based on the Equality Act, because you are being offered an unequal level of service. There are some really good hotel chains out there. So, for example, Holiday Inn Express and Crown Plaza will, if you are travelling with a carer whom it's not appropriate for you to stay in the same room as, they will give you a connecting room free of charge. So you only pay for 1 room. And that is, that's in their company policy based on Equality Act legislation.
That's
Fantastic. That's really good to know. What stumps me often is when you're standing at the desk, and there's not really much choice that you've got in that kind of situation. It's, well, that's what we have, and that's what you're good. And it just astounds me that you can't have a family room and need an accessible room. You don't seem to be able to get both. So thank you for that. It's really...
That's okay. I have absolutely been in that front desk situation where it's like I'm being offered like 2 options, neither of which are suitable for me, but I'm just going to have to make a compromise. Yeah. And it's really not an ideal place to be at all. But it does happen to all of us, and hopefully it certainly still happens to me as somebody who's supposed to be an expert around all of this. So hopefully that just gives a little bit of comfort.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that really fascinating insight into the legal position, especially in the UK. Laura, should we have another go? Oh no!
Miriam, has Laura tried to connect her audio? She tried to connect her audio to Zoom. There's a thing that says connect your. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to try that, Laura.
Where is it, Dean? Can you direct Laura?
Oh, crikey. It normally comes on when you're signing on, when you're about to sign in. But you should, hang on a minute, let me see where I can find it.
You want me to
Oh,
give
go on, Si, yeah. Go on, Si, come on.
Come on, Techno Man.
So when you go into Zoom, obviously you're in a Zoom meeting, so just press into Zoom, go into settings, go into audio, and normally I don't know whether you're on a PC or a laptop. Laptops have a really weird thing where it doesn't automatically register your laptop microphone. So if you look at speaker and then laptop. Okay, so go into microphone and then press the drop down and you'll see what's connected. So it could be same as system, either a USB camera with a microphone, so it will just say microphone. And then click into that one.
Have you found it, Laura? If you go, you know the bottom where it says the mute button, right? If you follow that arrow and then the drop up or drop down box comes, I think that's what Si's talking about.
Yes.
And then mine says same as system. I don't know if you can adjust it.
Mine says headphones. You've just got to keep trying them all. Just try one at a time.
Okay, Laura's still.
Now we might need to go for typing it today, unless anyone else has got any other ideas.
Do we give Jamie the heads up that we're going to come to him next if he wants to? If he wants to also type, or whether Emma's going to speak for him while we sort that out.
Okay, so I suggest, Laura, you type your question and we will come back to you. Dean, you've been waiting. Shall we do Dean or Jamie next? Let's go for Dean and then Jamie will come to you and then circle back to Laura. Dean, go for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Miriam. Yeah, hi, Carrie Ann. I just wanted to ask you, about, you mentioned about track hoists. Now, I don't use a track hoist, but I know several people that do. And what they've said to me in terms of looking for hotels is that, as you said on your blog or something you do, or might even be on Accessible, it's not mentioned that they don't mention track hoists, and it might be an idea if those are mentioned, because it's an essential only from the point of view from the person who uses the track hoist, the necessity for getting in and out of bed. They need to know whether that facility is available for that, for that particular reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, nice to meet you, Dean, because we've
nice
chatted quite a bit. So nice to meet you. You've just reminded me that I hadn't moved on to my last slide, which is where all of the contact details for everything is. So that's how you can find my blog. That's how you can find Accessible. And Accessible do have, so they will, any venue that they visit that has a hoist, whether it be a mobile hoist or a ceiling track hoist, it will be included in the access guide. So you can go onto Accessible, and there's a way that you can filter searches using different symbols. So there'll be a symbol for wheel-in shower, for example, and there is one for hoist available. So you can find hotels with ceiling track hoists on there, obviously only in the UK. And there is also a website called the Ceiling Hoist Users Club. CHUC. I don't know if it's had a recent update. It's run by sort of a charity consortium, but when I was sort of more in the field of travel advisory, that was the go-to source back in the day. You could find hotels and self-catering properties with ceiling track hoists.
Oh, cheers! Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, over to you, Jamie and Emma.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear? Hi. So in case anyone doesn't know, Jamie's in a different place to me, so I'm going to translate the best I can. Okay. He says he's sorry he was late. It's my fault for not organising things, but don't worry about that. Going back to what you said. Why? Why does everybody look at you? Oh, when you're at the hotel desk and you're asking whether there really is a double bed, even though you've booked one. And is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's what? It's regular that people are surprised. But
yeah.
I
can understand that frustration, absolutely. I had a situation a couple of months ago. It was the first time I'd travelled for work in ages, and I was alone. I travelled like 250 miles on the train. Got to my hotel, which was a hotel that I'd stayed in. I used to stay in once a month pre-COVID. And I got into the accessible room, and they'd put an extra like camp bed, like rollaway bed in the accessible room. So it wasn't actually accessible at all. I couldn't get around it. And what should have been a relatively straightforward question with the person from the front desk was the person then saying to me, "Oh, well, we don't have another room. Like, what do you want me to do?" Well, I want you to remove the bed so I can get in the room. Can you sort that out, please? But it's daunting and it's frustrating.
We were in one last week. It was we were going to a conference, and we was an accessible room, and it was okay, but there was a desk and a chair, and then there was an extra table and chair in the middle of the room. I was like, what is that doing in there? And because I'm fairly I'm not frightened, not backward in coming forward. I just went downstairs and I said, because obviously I could go downstairs, I was able to, and said, could you please just get someone to take this table and chair? Otherwise, I might just put it in the hallway. And they were fine. They removed it. They also brought us, because there was a tiny little flip down seat. This is a big bugbear of ours, because Jamie's not big, but he likes a nice comfy shower seat because he's not very stable. He's a bit wobbly. So they brought us a terrace chair, which is like a metal garden chair. It was really uncomfortable, but at least it was safe. We always have this. But it got wet and got a bit slippy. It's like, hold on to. Can I just say, while we're on the when we were talking about the beds, some hotels, they have these zip and link beds that they promise that they're going to zip together for you, and then they often don't. That is another place for your tie wraps, because if you want and they can't do anything about it, they can't zip them together, and the little metal catches are broken, you can at least tie the legs together, and then
sliding around.
Nobody's falling down the gap. Yeah. We too carry tie wraps, and
that's a brilliant tip. Thank you.
We did actually meet you. We met you at the An exhibition. Can't remember now.
Was it Nadex, possibly?
Was it not Nadex? I don't think. I think it was there was a competition. Oh God, can't remember. There was a survey. It was a funny place. It wasn't Nadex. It was a funny little exhibition, one of these mobility road shows in a funny place.
Yeah.
Anyway,
spent about 15 years doing those, so it could have been any of them. But it's nice to have met you.
Nice to see you again. Yeah, cool.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.
James says thank you as well.
Thank you. So now we're going back to Laura. I'm going to read it just so that it's easier for everyone to be able to access it, those that have already read it as well. Laura's question is around taking a long-term trip. Thinking about taking a 3 to 4 months to travel around Latin America and researching companies which can book this and take access needs into account. And just being mindful of thinking about wheelchair use in the airports, multiple journeys, scooters versus wheelchairs, and lots of heavy luggage to be mindful of. Does that summarise it, Laura?
Yeah, it's not sure. You can't hear me, can you?
Oh, we can hear
Yes!
you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Got there in the end.
Got there in the end. Yeah, like I say, I think it's a Windows Zoom thing being annoying. Yeah, so this is quite a big thing for me. I've done quite a few trips by myself, so quite used to kind of getting on planes by myself and loving the airport assistance, best thing I've ever done. And yes, it can be a bit awkward, like getting in a wheelchair and feel like you're kind of being pushed around, but actually they're quite good. If you say you want to go to certain shops and stuff, they do take you quite, I tend to find. But yeah, I think like everyone, I've had a really kind of difficult couple of years and things, and I'm in a position where I could be able to take a longer trip. And I've never done anything like never done anything else before, never had the kind of the gap year or anything like that. So it's yeah, daunting to say the least. And I'm a bit like you, Carrie Ann, that I do a lot of research beforehand. So I research all the public transport before I go anywhere. Yeah, all that kind of thing. So I kind of give myself a little plan of what to do each day. So I've got an idea of what things to do, that kind of thing. But decided that, you know, enough for the last 2 years, time to actually do something fun and do a longer trip. But yeah, just interested as well. Just trying to do that research and finding out companies that can do all that, take all those access needs into account. And the other thing I'm thinking about is like getting a scooter so I can get around. But obviously, yeah, the daunting thing is about that is being responsible for that for myself, taking it on multiple flights, and all that kind of thing. So sorry, lots and lots of questions in there, but I'm just feeling really inspired and really determined to yeah, not let myself be held back by my physical abilities, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, sounds like an amazing trip. I think it sounds fabulous, and I think you know, in terms of researching, as one of the earlier sort of questioners said, you know, there are other companies out there. So there are people like disabledholidays.com, like Limitless Travel. There's also a company, I think they're still going, called Enable Holidays. So there are quite a few specialists who will organize everything for you, who can add in things like mobility equipment hire, etc., who have visited the resorts, done their research. But I think it's important to say that you will pay a premium for that service. So there's this kind of way up between you're either spending time and using your own energy to do that bit, or you're paying somebody else to do it for you, and that's the trade-off essentially. I think that scooters in particular are really relatively easy to hire outside of the UK. So it's something that I used to get a lot of inquiries about in a previous role. And it's relatively easy information to find on Google with you know, if you're in a destination that is, I suppose, a bigger city or, you know, a resort type destination, Google the name and mobility scooter hire, and there should be, you know, you'll have listings of local companies. You'll also have listings of like UK companies who can arrange hire over there. So if you're concerned about taking a scooter on multiple flights, it might be worth looking at hiring in different destinations. But you know, the other thing is that you can privately buy your own and have it insured for travel as well. So I have insurance on my wheelchair for travel, which means that if there are any damage done by baggage handlers when I'm traveling, I'm covered for that. it's never happened yet, so I don't know what actually happened. If that happens, like if they just bring me a new chair or whatever. But yeah, there are certainly lots of different options there. And I think also, you know, if you're looking at a destination like Latin America, you're looking at something kind of a bit more off-grid than the traditional companies might do, then those kind of Facebook group resources that I mentioned earlier, so the Accessible Travel Club in particular, I think would be an excellent place to research that kind of a trip.
Brilliant, thank you so much. If it all happens, I'm intending on writing my own blog about it, trust me.
Amazing. Can't wait to read it.
We want to see pictures too.
Cool. Thank you so much,
Carrie Ann, because you've kind of brought it up, I think Claire made a comment in the chat about the issues of damaged wheelchairs and damaged things while you travel. Is that something that happens a lot, do you think?
I'll be honest, I'm touching lots of wood while I'm saying this, but it has never happened to me. Now that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen to other people. I know that it does happen to other people. I've seen the stories. I've got friends and family that it has happened to. It is an issue. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, and it is something that I worry about every single time I fly. Every single time I fly, when we're touching down, oh my goodness, is the wheelchair going to be okay? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to be okay? And I think how I've got to a place of peace with that is understanding that there is a lot of it that's out of my control. There is only so much that I can do to try and mitigate that happening, whether that be insuring my equipment properly, or whether it be, you know, as I said earlier, doing a bit of a tune-up before I go, so I make sure it's in optimal condition, so that if a bit is grabbed wrongly or whatever, that screw, that bolt isn't likely to come undone. I know of other people who have done things like they've printed out instructions for how it should and how it shouldn't be handled, and kind of stuck that to the chair. So that's an option as well. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm traveling to Amsterdam on the Eurostar later on this year, because I recently got a powered bike attachment for the front of my chair. And I am so in love with it that I'm just not yet willing to take the risk. And so actually we thought let's travel a different way. Let's try the Eurostar, and the benefit of that is that of course I can stay in my chair for the whole trip, and I can then independently access the toilet as well, because on a plane, as anybody who's flown as a wheelchair user will know, you know, having to ask for an aisle chair to then be wheeled down to the toilet, it's quite a dehumanizing experience. And you know, when I'm on my holidays, I want to be able to have a glass of champagne, have a glass of wine, relax, enjoy the trip. That's the start of it. So that's the idea with the train travel this year. But I appreciate mobility equipment damage is a huge issue. And there are certainly things that you can try and do to minimize it, but ultimately it is out of our control.
Yeah, no, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm very similar to you in terms of my preference for holidays. I like beach holidays. I like going abroad, but yeah, the most stressful part is getting there usually, and getting back sometimes. You know, sometimes it's been like the ambi lifts get delayed as well.
Yeah.
You know, so I find that's the most. Usually, I have to say, the cabin crew on the plane themselves are actually really good. It's usually the airport staff that I don't think they appreciate like how expensive our equipment is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other thing that I would say is, you know, if you do have a bad experience, be it at an airport or in a hotel or whatever, if you have the capacity, if you feel able to, making a complaint or giving feedback, but you know, it will.
I do.
It will change things, and it will get noticed. I sit on a lot of panels for accessible aviation, and airports and airport assistance services in particular have certain levels and certain targets that they have to meet in terms of, you know, getting people off planes quickly enough, number of complaints received, that sort of thing. So absolutely use your voice if you feel able to.
Yeah, we do. But it's one of the reasons I'm not very confident about traveling on my own, because you know, it's stressful enough even when I'm with other people. never mind if I end up marooned or something and I'm on my own. Although, you know, booking assistance can help in the airport itself, but it's all those little connections in between where you can end up a bit marooned, and that just, yeah, I don't feel as confident about sort of traveling on my own in that respect. But I guess it's one of those things you just have to go for it kind of thing and hope for the best.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you for that. It was the elephant in the room that hadn't been spoken about, the wheelchair airport issues. Becky, let's come to your question.
Well, I had two, one of which I think has just been answered. As someone who's never been on a flight, what were top tips for making sure your wheelchair's safe? Doesn't really sound like they've got any better in the last 20 years since my parents looked at it a while ago. So maybe we'll just keep going on cruises from the UK. One of my other questions was about the Access Able app.
Yeah.
Is the content that's on the app the same as that's on the website?
Yes, it's exactly the same. Yeah.
So are there certain areas of the country that are known as kind of black spots? Because at the moment, when I use it and I say I want to see a cafe or a restaurant, it tells me where the nearest hospitals are with cafes or restaurants, and that's about all I can get. Yeah,
so that's a very fair point, and probably one that it is worth addressing whilst you're all looking at Access Able. So Access Able create the information, they send somebody to each venue to check the information. That obviously generates a cost. Somebody needs to cover the cost of that person going there and checking the information, and indeed the rest of us creating the access information. And so we don't want disabled people to have to meet those costs, and so we recover those costs. Essentially, we're commissioned by whomever it might be that is paying us to create the information. So it could be a hospital, it could be an NHS trust, it could be a university or a college, it could be a private business. So we have contracts with people like Tesco, Marks and Spencer, Next, etc. Or it could be a local council, a local authority. So what you see in the more populated areas across Access Able is that, for example, Sheffield City Council might have contracted us to go and survey and create access guides to 500 venues across the city. And that'll include some council-owned venues as well as places to visit, places to eat and drink, doctors' surgeries, hotels, everything you can think of, basically. But ultimately, there are areas of lower coverage where we don't have that support and funding from partners in the area. It is something that we are constantly working on. It's something that we're working to try and improve all of the time, because we don't want accessibility information to be a postcode lottery. We want everybody to be able to access information about their local areas. But yes, I think so the original question is, the website and the app both contain exactly the same level of information. And yes, depending on where you live in the UK, you may find that there isn't quite as much information in your local area as there might be in others, but it absolutely is something that we're working on.
And Carrie, it wasn't sort of meant as a criticism. It was just I wasn't quite sure whether I was using the system correctly or whether I'd sort of set something up, or you could only get certain things on the website. So I was just checking.
And Carrie Ann, can I ask, if we were brave enough to talk to our local councils and told them about your app, if they're not already au fait with them, and encourage them to do that, is that something that would be useful?
It's absolutely something that we encourage. We actually say that if you're keen to support our efforts in your local area, then please do get in touch with us. I've popped the email address up here as well as the telephone number. Please do get in touch with us, let us know where you are and let us know how you might be able to support our efforts, because absolutely, you know, we have a team of people who go into council meetings, etc., all the time. And you can imagine how much more impactful it is if we have the support of a local disabled person. So absolutely, we'd love anybody's support around Access Able's mission, and please do feel free to get in touch with us.
Brilliant.